So coming to you from a hotel room, and glad to be doing it because it also allows me to be with my 3-year-old grandbaby, who's a pandemic baby. And so we haven't been able to be with her on a lot of her birthdays and things. So we're all gathering to celebrate this year. So, but I'm so glad and grateful to all the planners for the 5 presbyteries and for all of you that are gathered to find out about the resources of the Presbyterian Foundation. I'm a lifelong Presbyterian. I grew up in the Bronx, and someone had the bright idea to make me a ruling elder at the age of 14. So, and then after I got onto the session, no one wanted to be the commissioner to New York City Presbytery. So they decided, they said, Rose will love it. So the pastor would pull up outside of the Bronx High School of Science and take me to presbytery meetings. And then someone got the bright idea, since I was a ruling elder at the age of 17, to make me the vice moderator of the synod. So I was traveling around the synod during my freshman year at Harvard, moderating the annual meeting committee and doing all sorts of stuff. So this past assembly, I went as a prior moderator, because actually when I was ordained to ministry of word and sacrament, they said, Rose is back, let's make her the moderator of the synod. So, but I've been traveling afar around the country and sort of a wandering Aramean, serving the denomination, living in Louisville, living in Texas. And this is how I got involved with funds development to begin with, having been a pastor and serving the church in so many other roles. But it's not anything that I would have predicted God would have done with my life. But at this stage in my life, I think it's so important because it allows us to merge together our love for Christ, our love for God, our reliance on the power of the Holy Spirit, and finding the resources to support the amazing vision for ministry that we have. So being called by the foundation to come back to serve a region that goes from Philadelphia all the way up to Maine, and Andy's region is even bigger. I'll tell you about Andy in a minute. Is really a joy of my life. I'm back home. I have fond memories of spending time in your region and have been doing so ever since I was invited by your team to begin a conversation. I did a presentation this past September about Project Regeneration, which is one of the projects that we have in the foundation to serve our churches. I won't talk a lot about Project Regeneration today, but it's something that you can look for in your toolbox if you're interested in hearing more about that, and I'll probably talk a little bit about it. But anyway, the foundation goes back to 1799 as the original board of trustees of our denomination. And it was founded to be able to steward resources into the future, so that there would be resources for mission and ministry and wise husbanding, wifing, stewarding of all the resources, peopling of all the resources into the future. So the first president of that board of trustees, Elias Boudinot, left 2 houses in 1821 to be used to support the distribution of Christian reading materials in places that don't have them. 200 plus years later, we're still sending out resources to do that. Those are what we call permanent endowment funds. And for almost 200 years, that's the main thing that the foundation did, is to allow donors to leave resources and cultivate those resources to support whatever it is they want to support. So if you love the music ministry in your church, you can leave resources to support that. So for hundreds of years, we've been doing that to support Presbyterian mission causes. Last year, the 7,000, we now have 7,000 of those funds that we steward. And we sent out over close to $100 million for Presbyterian causes. So that continues to be a resource to our churches that you may not know about, or some of your churches may receive those quarterly payments from one of those funds that was set up decades ago by someone who loved your church and your ministry. And though that's, as I say, one of the main things that we've done for hundreds of years, but our commitment is to serve the church as one of the 6 agencies of the church, and we're reformed and always being reformed. So in the 1990s is where Andy comes into the picture. You know, in the 1990s, the board of the Presbyterian Foundation decided to create several other vehicles to be able to help Presbyterians support Presbyterian mission. And at that time, we created a family of mutual funds called the New Covenant Funds. Many of your churches may be familiar with those. They've been a great resource and vehicle to grow investments for churches. But we also created something called the New Covenant Trust Company. Now, why they both name them both the same thing, you know, it gets very confusing. The mutual fund and the trust company are named New Covenant. We believe in covenantal theology, so there you go. But the New Covenant Trust Company was developed, which is a fully owned subsidiary of the Presbyterian Foundation, which is a limited purpose bank, which allows us to offer vehicles for planned giving, legacy giving, all sorts of wonderful tools in the toolbox on our website for you to be able to utilize. And the New Covenant Trust Company is an option that we have that can be fully customizable for full investment management. So that is an amazingly powerful tool that we have that we can offer our churches. And it's been growing. It's grown to such an extent that even since I started this role almost 2 years ago, I now have a buddy. I have a partner. I have a regional buddy. We used to have to refer people back to people in the home office, which is in Jeffersonville, Indiana, across the river from the main headquarters in Louisville. But now I have a regional partner who also, I live in Middletown, New York. Andy lives in Fort Lee, New Jersey. And we can come to visit you together now more easily. And I want to introduce you to Andy Shin, who's our most recent addition and is right here in our region. And he represents the New Covenant Trust Company, which is doing amazing things with, as I say, fully customizable investment options, plan giving options. I was visiting with one church and I was talking about this, and someone who thought he was very familiar with the Presbyterian Foundation as a resource of the church said, "You mean I could have set up my trust through my own church?" And he didn't know about that. And it was something that he was would have been interested in doing. So as a way of supporting his church. So, but we also, for those who are interested in ministry, social impact ways to invest, all of those become very deep and wonderful conversations through the resources of the New Covenant Trust Company and many other tools that they have. So Andy, would you say a few words about the work that you do before we dive into the presentation and introduce yourself to the group?
Thank you.
When I say hidden resources of the Presbyterian Foundation, the New Covenant Trust Company is a big part of that. Did you know we have our own bank, our own limited purpose bank? So this is my first big reveal in this time that we're sharing together. And I love that it's an amazing person like Andy. So go ahead, Andy, take it for a few minutes and tell us about the amazing work that you've started to do.
Thank you, Rose, and good morning, everyone. So Rose mentioned NCTC is a regulated bank in the United States. You're either regulated by the Federal Reserve or the OCC, and we are regulated by the OCC. And so we have stringent standards to which we hold ourselves to. NCTC is really, what we do at the end of the day is to help empower churches and church members to create and sustain healthy, vibrant ministries through faithful stewardship of your investments. We are a full service financial planning, investment management, trust services firm. Currently, we manage about $500 million on behalf of about 400 churches. Rose and I are dedicated to our churches in the Northeast. I also cover Michigan and Ohio. And in our region in the Northeast, where we manage approximately $125 million across about 80 churches. Think of us as really an outsourced CFO. So at the church level, think of us as, kind of a partner in your financial management. And we will work with your finance committee in terms of budgeting and forecasting and projecting your financials. So join at the hips with the finance staff as your outsourced CFO. And that's really, I think, one of the key differentiating factors for us. We're not just going to help you manage your financial resources. We're going to look at that holistically across mission, ministry, and current financial situation of the church. The second piece of that is, think of us also as your outsourced CIO, Chief Investment Officer. We can create model portfolios that we believe will create long-term sustainable returns to continue to help fund church operations and your mission and your ministry. I've spent really the bulk of the past 30 years in the investment industry, in private equity and public equity and hedge funds, in the capacity of CIO and CEO, CFO, chairman of the board, board member across a number of different companies. And so, my lens is primarily commercial financial investing, but really the bigger lens is obviously the mission and ministry of all our churches and how we serve our region. So I'll stop there. Thank you. I'm really delighted to be a part of the group this morning. And thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much. One of the key things that I've learned is that since the New Covenant Trust Company is a fully owned subsidiary of the Presbyterian Foundation, which is one of the 6 agencies of the PCUSA, it creates a kind of ecosystem. So in the end of the day, if there are any profits at all from the New Covenant Trust Company, they pay a dividend back to the Presbyterian Foundation, and that funds me and my 10 colleagues around the country, and so many of the other things that we do absolutely for free for our churches. So I think, again, hidden resources of the Presbyterian Foundation, I find people are just aghast sometimes when they say, well, what does it cost for you to come and help our church? And I say, nada, because we're an ecosystem that's here totally to support the church, our churches, and the future of Presbyterian mission and ministry. So in that ecosystem, we can say, my travel costs are paid for and underwritten. My services as a consultant in all the areas we're going to be talking about this morning are underwritten and paid for by the total ecosystem that we share. And that's, God's economy, which really excites me. It's really wonderful. And I wish, I'm shocked by how many churches don't know about these resources that we're talking about here this morning. And so I just really want, by the end of the day, I've been serving the church since I was 14. I'm 61. I always have to think about that. I'm 61 now. By the end of the day, my goal is to ensure that it becomes a quite well-known source of resourcing, the Presbyterian Foundation. That's no longer one of the best kept hidden aspects of the work of the church, and that we find ways to make sure. I took the position in part because Tom Taylor, who's our president, is deeply committed. And he said in the interview, when I was being interviewed for the role, I asked him what he thought the greatest challenge was facing the church. And he had this, kind of thoughtful look. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, we just have to think harder about ways we can support our churches. That's our biggest challenge. So after this conversation, if there are things that you think, well, I'd love to see the foundation do this, please, be in touch with us, because we're always looking for ways that we could be of service to the church. I see that there's at least one question already in the chat. I'm sort of tempted to start focusing, but I want to give you the broader overview first, and then we'll get to the specific questions. So I'm going to begin sharing my screen. Is that seeable? Great. Now let me get it to slideshow. Uh-oh. I hate saying uh-oh and these kinds of things. And from the beginning. Okay, there we go. I like to use this scripture, Luke 6:38 from the Message, Eugene Peterson's The Message. Give away your life. You'll find life given back, but not merely given back with bonus and blessing. Giving, not getting is the way. Generosity begets generosity. That particular paraphrase version of Luke 6:38 has sort of become the anchoring scripture of my ministry. And as we have heard it read, I would also like to lead us in prayer. Let us pray. Holy and merciful God, we thank you for this time shared together in the Spirit. May it lay a fruitful foundation for the combined work and ministry that we share, and may it bring to light aspects of resources that will be fruitful and support the expansion of your kingdom in the ways in which we minister in our various places. We pray for each one gathered, and we pray for those who will be listening in the future, that they may find strength and hope and resources through this presentation, and that we together may serve you faithfully in every way. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I've already mentioned this, the slides will be available. So just to note that the Presbyterian Church USA established the foundation back in 1799 to cultivate, attract, and manage financial resources of individuals and institutions to further Christ's mission. I like this tagline that's here on this slide, that we bring people and mission together. That's, if you remember one thing as the takeaway, that we bring people and mission together through this faithful stewarding of resources. This is just the famous slide that shows you the complicated structure that we currently still are. But we are one of the 6 agencies of the PCUSA, and proud to be filling this role. I really like to say that the foundation of a healthy stewardship program, and stewardship in terms of developing a culture of generosity in our churches that touches on the annual stewardship drives, the annual pledging, or more and more pledging is not the central way that people are supporting their churches. And I know that's a shock to us who have come from backgrounds in which that's been so important, but generationally giving patterns we recognize are changing. But however we think of that annual support for our churches, and then major gifts support for our churches when we perhaps have to have a capital campaign to do various things, or we're trying to establish an endowment fund to support the mission of our churches, however we think of major gifts, and then however we think of legacy gifts, and however we're developing programs in our churches to support generosity in the biggest gifts that people may consider giving in their lifetime. Colleges are really good at asking for those gifts. Nonprofits are really good for asking for those gifts. But the constant love of our churches that we show and the constant way that it plays a role in our role in our lives should position us for just an outpouring of generosity from people as we continue to tell our story well about what it is and listen well for what it is that brings people joy in the life of their church and their relationships within their church, relationship to the way in which their church, all of our churches, are impacting lives and making a difference in the world for Christ. So I believe that that whole ecosystem that we just talked about of a culture of generosity, from the annual giving to the major giving to the legacy giving, it all has to be based on a foundation of caring about what brings us joy in the life of our churches. What brings us joy? What gets us up, as seekers, as people who are looking for ways to make a difference. We need to get, I was really running on empty at one point in my life in ministry. And somewhere along the way, I think I discovered a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And this wonderful book about creativity reminds us to get unstuck by going back and asking in our childhood what brought us joy. And I think that's one of the reasons why I always start with this kind of question. And I think all of our stewardship programs, all of our building culture of generosity programs should begin with this question. We should be deeply curious and want to organize our conversations and our announcements, not around we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing this, we're doing that. That's sort of deadening. It's wonderful that we're doing all those things and we're communicating all those things, but we really want to get to the level of where the feelings are, where people find hope and joy and pride in the work of their church, in the work of our churches, and even in living our lives. That's the source of energy. Or in our ordination vow, when we say energy, intelligence, imagination, and love, it's all jump-started by going back to this sort of taproot and constantly asking, what is it that is the DNA of our church? What is it, or our presbytery? What is it that we really love? What is it that we really care about? And so this deep question about where we find joy, and what is it that people really love about their church, is at the center of the conversations that we should be having and the stories that we should be telling. Once we understand what those categories of joy are, and love of the work of the church, we need to honor that. We need to respect that. It's very respectful, standing on sacred and holy ground, to hold those things. Now, we may love many other things as well, but we need to kind of keep a focus on those deep, like there are some churches that just love music and worship. That's one of their greatest loves. But they also love children's ministries, and they also love social justice ministries, or there are some churches that just love fellowship. That's at the heart, building fellowship and giving wonderful pastoral care. So as I travel and I visit hundreds of churches, it's so fascinating to me when I read the bulletin and I listen to the announcements and I pay attention to what people talk about with joy, and with real deep love. And I begin to assemble a profile of the church in my mind. And each church's profile is different. It's like fingerprints, right? And so I begin to think to myself, what are the categories for this church that they should be relating most of all their deep stories? Let me tell you what our food bank did this past week. Here's a story about a family that was helped through our food bank. How can we tell those deep stories about things that our churches care about the most? And how can we make those stories infuse them with feeling. Maya Angelou, the great poet, said one of her great quotable quotes, if you go to Amazon, you'll find posters made of this quotable quote, is, I've learned, Maya Angelou says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And let me say that again. Maya Angelou says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that for me, that quote has also become an organizing principle of how I try to break through and create a sense of a paradigm shift for our churches. We need to get unstuck from the doing mode. We're doing so much. I'm shocked by the amount of times that I visit churches and I talk about all the ideas and resources I'm going to be presenting to you today. And I could do it, yeah. I'm so excited about the resources. I just go on and on and on. You'll witness that here today. I just go on and on and on about all these great resources. And then at the end of the presentation, someone will say, "Oh, but the pandemic, and we haven't been doing anything. And we used to." Everybody wants to kind of look back at the past, like Lot's wife, turn around and look at the past and say, but we used to do all these, great things. Our past is our glory time. And they're, such a low level of energy. And I try to get to churches when I visit them early. I walk around the church. I observe what's going on. I read the bulletin boards. I look at the memorial plaques. I try to make it a real walkthrough with new eyes. And I will say to that person, I read your bulletin. I listened to your announcements. I looked at your bulletin boards. You're doing a lot. We're doing, but we have not repurposed our stewardship teams as culture of generosity teams that tell our stories about what we're doing in a way that people feel them and feel the joy of them and relate it to the DNA of the church, of the things that we really deeply care about. When we do that, then the engine of giving gets the fuel that it needs. The engine of giving and the engine of being excited about giving to support those things really gets the fuel that it needs. This is a profound paradigm shift for us. We've been so busy doing, but this goes back in a way to when I served the synod as a young person, when my hair didn't have all this gray. Our synod stewardship team was called Mission Interpretation. Did anybody remember that? Don Byers, and the Mission Interpretation team of the synod. So we've known that it was about telling our story. We've known that stewardship, successful stewardship, is telling our story effectively, interpreting the great things that we're doing well, and doing it in the way Maya Angelou would say. Well, I'm going to pause my sharing, stop the sharing, and invite you, if you're awake, as I'm barely awake on the West Coast here, but I set 4 alarm clocks this morning. I'm revved up now. And you're all probably looking at me kind of bleary-eyed going, who is this woman? And why is she annoying us like this morning? But I would like to invite you to put in the chat one thing or 2 or 3, however many you can in the time frame I'm going to give you, which isn't very long. Think about what brings you joy in your church. Think about what brings you joy in your church and put a word. This is what we call, don't put it yet though, type it in. And then we're going to do a cascade effect of the words. I like when we do that. So I'll say 1, 2, 3, go, and then you hit enter. So get your words ready. and type in a word that describes, or a phrase that describes what brings you joy in your church. Okay, does everybody have something in there, or many of us have something in there? Okay, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go, and then we'll populate the chat with all these great joys that we share in our church for our churches. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. Family, loving support, children, junior deacons, fellowship, giving back to the community, music, youth group, mission, children, fellowship events, children. Praise God. This is just a beginning sample of some of the amazing things that we love about our churches. And I don't know if you, like me, just reading it over, I felt my energy shift just from this simple exercise. My energy shifted. And so shifting energy is one of that may sound very sort of woo-woo new age, but I see it in real life when it's happening. When we ask people to focus more on what we love, what we find joy in, what we are doing that supports what we love and what we find joy in, and where we see impact being made in the world through our churches, energy shifts. And we begin to attract to us more of that positive energy. So I thought that was a fun way to get us to connect, each of us to connect to our joys. Going back to sharing. Great. I think that's a great exercise to do with your sessions, with your deacons. It's a great exercise to do with your stewardship team. And we talk about rebranding the stewardship team to be a spirit of generosity team, and attract more than, you always will need some finance people on your stewardship team, but it's usually like the group that nobody wants to chair, like the short straw in the session, and it should be the most that people should be fighting over chairing the culture of generosity team or stewardship team. Now, we don't change our theology of stewardship. We love the word stewardship, but in our culture today, the word stewardship doesn't carry a lot of meaning in the general culture. And so talking about it in terms of generosity and building a culture of generosity, and that you need young people who can make TikToks or short videos, and you need social media managers, and you need people who can tell great stories, and journalists, and you need videographers if you have them. You want to invite people who are really always have their pulse on the things that are happening in the congregation and can collect great stories. And that makes for a team that is really able to begin to interpret those joys. But it's a leadership process to develop a deep sense of what these categories are. What does our church really love? And how does that factor into our mission statement? And we're going to be talking more about that. Let's see, I have to shift my little thing, my boxes of faces over. Can you see this iceberg? This is a classic image of how this idea of building a culture of generosity. Oftentimes we only do the very tip of the iceberg. We only really talk to people at the level of the needs of the church. Our church has needs, and we show people the budget in a line item budget that is all numbers. People, we need to be addressed at the level that's under the surface, the subconscious reality of our being, of our consciousness. There's so much more under the surface than there is above the surface. So once we begin to talk with people about the level of their feelings, and get people to start to open up about their stories. I did a presentation about these things recently at a church for an adult ed class. And at the very end of the class, people were really struggling. We struggle with this paradigm shift that I'm talking about. We struggle with it, and they were struggling with it. And then one elderly gentleman at the very end of the class said, well, I can tell a story about how this church has changed my life. And I said, and the whole energy in the room shifted. He gave a lot more details about his story and how the church, in his view, had really saved his life. And the whole energy in the room shifted. And I said, by George, I think we've got it. I was able to leave that day, that group, and they just really understood that by telling those kinds of stories, we suggest that before you announce your offering. Well, I gave this suggestion at one church that had eliminated the announcement of the offering from their service. That's not a good thing to do, people. Even though we make assumptions that everybody knows how to give, that everybody in our circle is automatically tuned in to how to give. And we don't talk about the offering. I mean, this particular church I was visiting, as I was doing a presentation on plan giving, I said, well, first we have to address that you didn't talk about the offering at all during your worship service. That's the first thing we have to talk about. But we also suggest that before you announce the offering, you tell an impact story about one of the things that your church is doing that a lot of churches give the announcements right before the offering. And they say, remember to do this, remember to do that, remember to do this, remember we're having this, and it doesn't have any kind of focal point, and it doesn't touch people at the level of their feelings. So we suggest, and maybe you can do, if it would be too much trouble to move the announcements from right before the offering, then end the announcements with an impact story, just a 2-minute story. If you're a technological church, you could show a 2-minute video that shows one way that your church has had an impact in the areas that your people care about. Or you could just have someone get up and tell a story about how this church has made a difference in my life. And you don't have to end it by saying, and so you should give to the offering. That's what goes on in this subconscious level of things. If you connect two pieces, put them in proximity together, then people will make that connection on their own. But if you do it regularly and you do it often and you do it with energy, intelligence, imagination, and love in ways that show the connection between the things that this church, you've done the deep work of figuring out, what do we really love and care about as a church? What brings us joy? Now let us tell an impact story right before announcing the offering on a regular basis. Now people will say, do we have to do it every week? As if it's a burden. It shouldn't be a burden. It should be a joy. It should be, we have things to talk about, to share, to be proud of, to celebrate the ways in which this church is making a difference in all of our lives. We give minutes for mission about things that we're doing to help people way over there. We need to become better at talking about the ways in which the Holy Spirit is making a difference in us right now. And our relationship with Jesus is helping us to do the work of be the hands and feet of Christ in the world. And we see how that's making a difference. Once we start doing that, people who tune into our online services, who hopefully are being welcomed by our digital deacons and our invitations to hospitality and our creation of community online. So we're just not a TV program, but we're creating community in those spaces. Then they're hearing ways in which they can give and connect through us and to us in some really creative new ways. And we're being reformed and always being reformed, which is the heart of who we are. So we have I just added this slide because I wanted you to see me sucking my thumb in the middle on the steps of University Heights Presbyterian Church in the Bronx. lifelong Presbyterian here. My brother is the one in front of me, and it was his baptism. He was being baptized at University Heights Presbyterian Church. And I wanted to give you a sense of what the church used to look like. We don't look like that anymore. We don't dress up like the queen with our purse on our arm, and well, the ladies have to wear hats when they go to church. Another picture of how my father used to force us to wear hats when we went to church. And I'm looking very sad as a 7 or 8-year-old, but I decided to take that one out. But I just want to say the church is changing and has been changing. It's not as if the pandemic was something new for us. I mean, obviously it was new for the whole world, but there are a lot of social construction conversations about the church that are reminding us that these changes were going on for a long time. The pandemic just accelerated them and catapulted us as Presbyterians into a new set of realities, which we can either choose to accept as our new normal, that we're not going to go back. I visited one church to do some stewardship and generosity work, and they said that they had stopped streaming their service because they want to force everybody to come back. How do you think that's going for them? We are not going to go back to this image of the church, no matter how hard we try, or to the 70s. This was the 60s, so we're not going to go back to the 70s image. We're not going to go back to the 80s image. We're not going to go back to the 90s image. We're not. You get my point. But we are, however, going to be reformed and always being reformed and resurrection people, which means that we believe that God is in the business of bringing what we thought was dead back to life in new and exciting and dynamic ways. And the foundation has a lot of tools to help churches with that. This is an overview of not all the things, because Project Regeneration isn't here. Campaign, I can work with churches on capital campaigns, but anything that relates to building a culture of generosity, which sort of counterintuitively includes just the beginning of that conversation, helping to facilitate a conversation about what is your church's vision for its future? What is your church's mission statement? And does everybody know it? And are you excited about it? If it begins with, we are a welcoming church of Jesus Christ, but when I come to your church, I can't find the entrance. I can't find the door. I have to sit in the parking lot and wait for people to come so that I can follow somebody into the building. Then maybe the mission statement needs to be reviewed and brought back into focus. Make it sharp and focused on who we are as a church. Why would people miss us if we aren't here in our community? What about us is distinctive and unique? So I'm able to, because we really believe that a strong, flourishing stewardship program is based on a strong sense of the values, the shared values, the mission statement, and the vision plan of the church. Sort of surprised me that I have a free rein to do that work in addition to sharing all the other resources of the foundation. It's part of the work that I really love, because we believe that that is the foundation for making sure that you're telling the right stories. You've paid attention to what is the DNA of the church, this church. What are our fingerprints? What do people care about here? And then you use all of our other tools. Narrative budgeting. We have amazing tools in the Stewardship Navigator that can help you create your own narrative budget, because once you know what your categories are that you care about, you can look at that line item budget and you can create a different budget. Now, you're not going to get rid of I was reading line item budgets at the age of 14 in my session meetings. The line item budget is the tool for the finance committee, the true finance committee, to regulate the inflow and the outflow of resources. You've got to approve a budget. You've got to manage the budget and see any red flags in the budget, but it doesn't tell your story. You need an additional tool, which is called a narrative budget, which some people do a narrative budget by just taking the same categories that they had in their line item budget and putting a paragraph of explanation underneath it. That's not a narrative budget. You've got to do the work of asking these deeper questions. What are the categories of things that our church really loves and cares about? And then you crunch all of your personnel costs into a percentage-based formula, all of your building costs into a percentage-based formula that relates them one-on-one to those maybe 4 or 5 categories of things that your church really loves. And by doing that, and then adding stories and pictures to each of those categories, you can tell your church, for every dollar you give to our church, 25% goes to support amazing worship, because a portion of the pastor's salary supports amazing worship. 25 cents of every dollar goes to support amazing community outreach, because a portion of the pastor's time and the building space and the administration and every other cost that you have in the church helps to support the food bank, and other ministries that you're doing in the community. Basically, in creating a narrative budget, the enemy of the good is the perfect. You're not going to get everything down to the penny, the way Harry Goodwin used to stand up in every annual meeting in my home church and wave the annual report and say, point of order, there's a penny out of order in the budget. You're not going to be able to be Harry Goodwin with a narrative budget. But what you are going to do is get people excited about stewardship again in the life of the church, because they're going to see the connection of the story of the church and what matters to the church and the budget. So it's an interpretive tool that every church should have. And I can help you create it. I did a webinar for the Synod of the Northeast with a full explanation of it. We have resources. We have a tool to help you create it. So visioning, pastoral challenges and stewardship, building a culture of generosity in your church, e-giving, if you don't have it, we have a platform for that. Knowing all about the New Covenant Trust Company and all the resources that Andy helped us understand earlier. Plan giving, how to set up a plan giving program, how to reinvigorate your plan giving program, investments, as we mentioned, and any form of consultation in any of these areas. And as I said, campaign help with a capital campaign, help with what we call Project Regeneration, which is really a model program that helps you envision your future as a church. I'm working with a number of churches in your regions right now in that area. And almost anything else that you would come up with, we can be of help with. We are a back room, as Andy said, for you, for these conversations. I was a solo pastor for a long time, and you're not alone, is really what it comes down to. We are here to come alongside you, and we are here to help you and support you. My contact information again in the slides, and it was in the chat. I have mentioned this idea of a paradigm shift. So this idea of a paradigm shift, it's post-pandemic, but I've already mentioned that it was starting long before the pandemic. That we need to be able to move from a scarcity thinking back to a sense of abundance, which is based in who we are, where we find our joy. And we need to be able to move from funding the budget to funding mission and vision. The conversation shouldn't be about how are we going to fund the budget, or the treasurer getting up and saying, we're in the hole, people. I was just in conversation with a really exciting pastor who's doing amazing things, and the church is flourishing, was flourishing during the pandemic, is flourishing now. And you want to know something really controversial that he said? He said he thought a growing church should always have a deficit. You remember that conversation, Andy? Andy's grinning. It was a little bit controversial. It caused us to sit back a little bit in our diner booth, and I had to think about it. And I thought about it and I said, I think that's true, because a church that is innovating is taking risks. and is getting out ahead of itself and doing things that put it on the edge. And we're not saying, Andy and I would be the first to say, well, wait a minute, think about, and we do that in Project Regeneration. We do a whole free financial analysis for churches to help them understand they're burning through their resources too quickly. So they really do need to be thinking about how do we find this reinvention for ourselves? How do we find this new future that we're excited about, that people will want to join us on this journey and on this path? And how do we become truly hospitable and welcoming and growing and incorporating new people and new ideas into the work of the church? But we need to move from the idea that we're just funding what we have to the idea that we're funding a really big, hairy, audacious goal in the area of mission and vision that people are excited about and families are excited about, and that they want to see just as much as they want to support their college or a nonprofit that they believe is changing lives. They're excited about putting aside a worthy, or as one member of a church I served used to always get up and say in the stewardship presentation, he would say, I want to be giving an honorable portion of what God has given me to the work of the church. How can I know that? How can I know that I'm giving an honorable portion? We don't always talk about tithing, but we have always talked about percentage giving. And but I love, because again, it's that Maya Angelou thing. It has more feeling in it. It's connected to that deep subterranean glacier image that I showed. How do I know for myself that what I'm giving to the church is an honorable portion of what God has appointed to me in the blessings that God has given to me? We often will suggest a resource, and we use it in the Project Regeneration program, called The Sailboat Church by Joan Gray. If you're not familiar with it as a resource, it's a great Lenten or Advent study. It's a great year-round study. It can be repeated because half of the book is 40 days of prayer. The first half of the book is Joan Gray's kind of walk around the church, her impressions of how we're stuck as the Presbyterian Church rowing, that we're rowing hard, we're working hard, we're rowing, and we think we have to do it all ourselves. But we ought to balance and spend a little bit more time, or maybe a lot more time, depending on the church, sailing, which means we put up our sail and let the Ruah of God, the wind of God, carry us forward into our future. And that makes it easier for us to be able to move from this sense that we're working at funding the budget to we're trusting God together. Once we have a really clear sense of the DNA of who we are as a church, we're trusting God together that the resources will be sent and attracted because we are on the right path, because we have done the work of understanding what is God really calling us to do and the impact God is calling us to make as a church. And then we're not keeping that to ourselves. We're announcing it. We're proclaiming it for the world to see. We're telling our stories about it. And that is what makes a strong stewardship program, a strong culture of generosity program, having done that groundwork and then building the ways in which we're telling our stories into a year-round program, whether it's a year-round program for the annual giving program, a year-round program for the major gifts and capital program, a year-round program for the legacy giving program. We need to be fueling and telling those stories. I think I've already touched on a number of these background reflections that I like to share. Churches are different fingerprints. I don't know if I've said enough about engagement. There's a great book by Kay Katan called The Church in the Post-Pandemic World. She talks a lot about engagement. This idea that engagement, we won't be measuring, because we're in this shift time, we're shifting. We will not be measuring how strong we are as churches based on how many people show up for worship. We won't be measuring, as someone says, kind of coarsely, butts in the pew. we'll be finding tools to measure how we are engaging and making impact. So you'll be measuring the fact that people were engaged with your mission projects throughout the week, or your social family ministries throughout the week, or or in their workplace. You'll be finding ways for people to report back the conversations that they had with people, giving them hope. How did you share the hope of Christ this week in your daily life? You'll be measuring the number of visits that the elders made to the sick and shut in. You'll be measuring the number of visits that the deacons made to people who indicate that they need prayer. You'll be finding ways to measure and report out the kind of engagement that we're having, the kind of impact that we're having in the world. Because more and more people will select to watch online, to do other things on Sunday. The pandemic busted up this idea that the only thing to do at the 11 o'clock hour is to be in church. And if you're not there, you're not a good Christian. We now understand that there are a lot of different ways to do that. And the community of the church will be curating and cultivating more ways. We'll be happy, we'll be delighted. My daughter goes to a great church, and every fifth Sunday they suspend worship and they go out to do something in the community, to hold a program, to make a difference in the community. But then it goes back to the Rick Warren book. That doesn't mean they don't worship. They're just not doing it on Sunday morning. They find other times for their core community to gather and worship, and other ways for them to do that. And it opens the door for creativity. It's not the only way to do it, and I'm not suggesting it is, but I'm saying that each church, based on those different fingerprints that we have and different DNA that we have, will be finding churches that will continue and thrive, will find ways to do it on the basis of how are you measuring engagement, not people showing up. It's like, and it's a form of evolution in a sense. When toddlers are just doing parallel play, we want them to develop to a different level, and in a way, maybe that's what God is helping us to do. But that requires change. And the next background reflection that I have is this change from technical to adaptive change, which we've been talking about for a long time. Adaptive change needs us to stop and learn new ideas so that we can incorporate creative challenges. Technical change means, just find the right textbook and it will tell us how to do it. Like we all wanted to learn how to stream our services. Well, where's the textbook that shows us how to stream the services? But the textbook doesn't necessarily tell you that you need to actually not just stream your services, you need to create real community in that space. You need to carry your DNA of hospitality into that space. You need to carry your DNA of getting people excited about the stories of the mission and vision of your church into that space. You need to host social gatherings and meetups in that space. It's not enough to just be a TV show that people can switch the channel. You need to be engaging community in that space. And that requires new learning and new ways to take our old ideas. It's a Sankofa idea from the Ghanaian tradition, the Sankofa bird. Let's look back at the past and bring the best of the past into the future. So I love the idea of digital deacons, for example. Deacons are great. Deacons are the best thing since sliced bread. Deacons are love with skin on them. Let's bring deacons into the digital space. Isn't that cool? I love that idea. And churches who are doing that. We're already talking about pandemic and post-pandemic realities. I like the idea that we have less choice now. It's like God has said, you're either outward facing or you're limiting yourself to a limited future. It's in the Project Regeneration, our first of 7 options that we encourage churches to discuss. The first one is age in place and do nothing. So if you don't want to be outward facing, you're de facto making that choice in many respects. We are reforming and resurrection people. That has to be at the foundation. I think I've said it many times. And uncovering the buried treasure that we represent, that the foundation represents in our denomination, requires a paradigm shift to a whole different approach of curiosity. What are the resources we already have available to us that we just haven't utilized? And I think that's a big part of what we represent. This is a slide that just reminds you of everything I just said. They say, you know, in order to get a gift, you've got to ask 7 times. 7 times. Build that into your stewardship program. You ask 7 times, and the other piece is you thank 7 times. How many of us actually, I did a little article for our stewardship newsletter that pastors can subscribe for, because we have a whole toolbox full of resources that you probably don't know about. And we've got a really good website. So go there and subscribe for everything. And you can see my newsletter article that says, typical wisdom in development circles is you've got to ask, you've got to ask, and you ask in a lot of different ways before you actually make the real ask. You build the relationship in so many different ways first. That's why I say you ask 7 different ways. Through your storytelling that I'm talking about, that's a form of asking. You're preparing people to understand their relationship with why it's important to them. But then you also thank 7 times. The financial secretary just sending out a record of giving is not really a thank you. Even if it says thank you at the top, it doesn't feel like a thank you. How many times and ways do you build into your culture of generosity, thank you? I was with one church, and they have a really major donor in the church who has helped them in so many different ways. And the pastor told me that this person, basically in the face of their most recent debt campaign, said, "I'm done. I'm finished. Don't come back to me again." And didn't explain why, or wasn't even asked why. They just said, "Oh, okay." So I said, what is your history of thanking this person? And if you would have seen the blank look on the pastor's face, the shocked and blank look as they suddenly, is like that little light bulb just went off above their head. They said, "Oh, did they want to be thanked? Do any of us want to be thanked? Or do we think it's enough that we're doing this for God?" We need to be so joyful and so generous and so willing to find ways to say thank you and see what people are doing. And this is also connected to the counterintuitive thing that we really deeply believe, which is that pastors need to know what their people are giving. And I know I remember as a young pastor, I walked through that like a minefield. I walked through that idea like a minefield. But we really believe that it's one of the biggest spiritual needs and concerns of our churches. And so pastors should be trusted. If pastors are trusted with every other issue in the life of the church, then pastors should be trusted with this issue. So they can be aware of the holistic ways in which we are thanking people as well as asking people. This slide is a cool slide that shows this ecosystem that I've been talking about the resources for stewardship, and how we don't just ask, but we need to be laying the foundation of telling the story through our mission and vision statements, our case statements for specific projects, celebrating the story. Preaching and teaching needs to relate to the things that really matter to the church. And then the ask involves all of these categories that we don't often think about: the annual stewardship program, the time and talent program, the plan giving program, the capital funding program, the special giving opportunities, and the year-end giving. All of these should be organized in such a way that there is a ongoing cycle, and that we evaluate in a season of learning and planning We take a deep look at what are our future needs? What does our endowment planning look like? What do our capital needs look like? How are we asking after every effort? How are we asking some simple questions that, again, I learned from a really cool pastor that Andy knows as well. We ask questions like, where do we see God in our stewardship programs? Where have we seen God? What could we do better? What do we where do we see connections? Who do we need to be connecting with? Not just the major donors, but the regular givers, the people who haven't fallen off in their making sure that they're pledging and keeping up with their pledges. How are we building connections and opportunities for people to connect to the things that they love and that they will love to support? So when you're visiting and you find out that someone really loves music and worship, or they really love what brings them life is the children's programs of the church. How are you telling stories directly to them that help them to see opportunities for their support? And affirmation, this keeping the momentum going is all about the thanking and the celebrating. Throw yourself a party. Jesus was a party animal. One pastor friend of mine says all the time, always throw wherever Jesus was the best party. And the resources followed Jesus. We know that the women who followed and provided, and the men who followed and provided resources. So in the post-pandemic reality, we need to focus on our core mission. We need to offer actual experiences. This engagement focus. People will be excited about throwing on a same color t-shirt and going apple picking together. People will be excited about throwing on a different colors t-shirt and going and packing food at the food bank together. People will be excited about throwing on yet another t-shirt and having family parties together. How do we offer actual experiences that bring people together and become gateways for people to join us? It's kind of hard to get into a church where people have been together for 40 years doing the same groups and things together. What makes us think that it's easy to join us in those realities? We've got to start new things and go out and do new things and bring people in to do new things. I always used to tell the churches that I pastored, we need to budget to start, and this is where that deficit that I talked about earlier could come into play. We need to be budgeting to start new things every year. We need to, in order to be a vital church, we need to start 3 or 4 or 1 or 2, depending on your size as a church. We need to start new things, new experiences, invite people in so that they can join something that they feel like they're part of helping to build together. That doesn't mean they also might not, join the craft group, or join the traditional Bible study, but it's not really a good way in. And so it's a nurturing thing for the people you have there to offer actual experiences. And that's how people, my young family that I'm visiting with now, that's kind of what they have time for, right? They don't want everybody to go off in a room by themselves because they have no family time together built into their lifestyle. They want to be able to do things where they could be a family together. Worship, not only worship, but let's go do something, a project, a trip, an experience together as a family. That's how you're going to engage people. Focusing on community and connection is a big part of the future of the church. Again, it's that outward focus. What does the community need and how can we serve it together? Value and expand online church. Don't be the church that says, yeah, we're going to force people to come back, so we're going to stop streaming. That doesn't work. And it says that you don't really value that community that has been served and formed. And that people who want to come back to church but can't, or who would be taking too big a risk to do that, don't matter to you. Nurture agility and innovation. We don't really know how to do that yet, but we need to try. It goes back to what FDR said during the New Deal, right? We need to try a lot of stuff. A lot of it won't work, but we need to try it. We need to be permission giving about trying and celebrating the wins and being gracious and merciful about the things that fall right on their faces, as I often do. It all starts with that sense of laying the foundation of your mission statement, your vision plan, and developing your impact testimonies. That's really what this is all about. You know, that your values, mission, and vision say everything about giving. But that's a paradigm shift. And if you're still sitting there going, what the heck is she talking about? It's because you haven't made that shift. And the preponderance of the rest of the many slides that I have here are just kind of edging towards you and giving you different lenses to think about how to make that shift. It's with shared values. It's with scriptures that remind us to think about what's excellent and praiseworthy, like Philippians 4:8. It's doing year-round stewardship and culture of generosity and show and tell, like goes back to kindergarten. You know, I'm really excited about this and I want to tell you about this. I'm going to show you what it looks like. Time, talent, treasure, and testimony, creative, color the picture in for people. It's asking, what is our story? What is it that we do well as a church, in our community, in our world? How are we participating with Christ? I have this list of like checklists. This is what you should have going on, you know, to have this strong, flourishing stewardship program. The strong, clear mission and vision in place. You ought to have a narrative budget. You ought to make your annual report like your narrative budget, lots of pictures, lots of stories, not just reports from committees. You should have educational sessions and town halls and small gatherings where you're talking and telling stories of impact about your vision. You should have the offering time be a high time in the service, not a lull, and a time to tell an impact story. You should be preaching once a quarter about not giving. That's why pastors get freaked out about preaching about stewardship. I'm not going to preach about you giving. I'm going to preach about the impact of the mission of the church and how the resources that people give make that possible. You're going to have a vision Sunday and an update on your vision plan every 6 months to say, how are we doing in our 5-year plan? Are we excited about it? It's not like, are we succeeding? But are we still energized about it? It's like a pep rally, you know, for the vision plan. And you should have a year-round calendar for all forms of giving in the life of your church. These are the things that really fuel your stewardship program. It's another way to say it. Like I said, I'm just going to say it in 75 different ways until it clicks. Preaching, minute for mission, during, before the offering, newsletter, e-newsletter, brochures, town hall meetings, vision Sundays, desserts and dialogues, Sunday school testimonials, video testimonials, and the narrative budget, and as many new ways as you can come up with to tell your story once you have that foundation in place. I like this graph. Again, it's just another way. When is it going to click? You know, here you have another visual to say, a visionary church doesn't just talk about balancing the budget, talks about changing lives. A visionary church doesn't guilt people into giving, it talks about the needs of the world. A visionary church doesn't say giving balances the budget, but giving changes the giver. It's a spiritual process. It is a deep spiritual process. And we preach and teach about that, about how giving changes the giver. The offering isn't a timeout. I don't know how much more I can emphasize that. If you only take one idea away, the offering is not a timeout. The offering is a high moment in this process of helping people understand how the church is having an impact. You want to be prayerful. You want to celebrate your church. You want to be visionary. You want to communicate. You want to involve many people. You want to fund ministry, not raise funds. You want to be inviting, not threatening. You'd be surprised. Sometimes it can come across as threatening. You want to challenge your congregation. You want to have a dedicated group. So you have to have a committee, and the committee needs to be excited. And we think maybe it should be called the Spirit of Generosity Team. You want to have session support. You want to have pastoral support. We pastors can't run scared from this issue. We have to be leaders in this issue, not just by our own support of the church, but our own incorporating it into the work that we do. We want to have annual planning, year-round calendars. We want to share stories, personal stories, and through the narrative budget, the story of the church. We want to have gratitude. We want to have so much gratitude. We want to be telling people thank you many more times than they want to get sick of hearing us saying thank you. So at least 7 times. But what did Jesus say about 7 times? Jesus said something about 7 times. He said not just 7 times, but 7 times, 70 times. So you want people to get tired of hearing the gratitude. I put this slide up because many times we do SWOT analysis of our church, but we need to do a SWOT analysis of our process. What is it that gets in the way of our church being able to do these things? What are our weaknesses where we struggle? Is it communicating? Is it thanking? Is it just being hospitable? Is it trying new things? How can we import trainings and skill sets to help us with our weaknesses? And what are our opportunities? Things that we never thought about doing that we could do totally differently. And what are the threats? And we could all make a list of our threats and then we could just stop there. But we need to go back and work this process as many times as it takes before we have high energy. This is a slide that compares the line item to the narrative budget, but I've already talked about that. I've already talked about this. Now we're into the resources. This is going to be a super fast, because I want to leave some time for our questions. These slides will help you. Go to our website. Out of all the agencies, well, I'm bragging now, and you could challenge me. If you find a better agency website, let me know. But out of all the 6 agencies, I think we've got one of the best websites in the business for you. Here you will find real tools and real resources. So find our website, explore our website. If you have questions, I am your Sherpa to the mountain of resources. So reach out to me with your questions, or just, when are you going to be in the area, Rose? Let's have a cup of coffee. I want to use you as a consultant. You know, I want to bounce some ideas off of you. I'm here for that. This is a chart of the 4 different investment options that we offer. You've heard about the New Covenant Trust Company and the New Covenant Funds. We also have you heard about how for 200 years, we've stewarded Presbyterian endowment funds, or we often call them permanent endowment funds, because some churches love the return of the endowment fund so much. We also offer the opportunity to participate in that endowment pool for churches. We call it an endowment in a box. You'll be treated exactly the way beneficiaries are of endowment funds. Some churches love that option. It's our 4th option. If you have questions about these, call Andy for New Covenant Trust Company. Call me for everything else. This is a slide that gives you the information for the website of the New Covenant Trust Company. By the way, they're part of us. They have a cool website too. So you can go there, but really there's just enough on that website to make you interested in calling Andy or me to get you to Andy. So it's a great resource as well. These are a couple of slides that I added that, if you're interested, remind you that the investment in investing our funds through the markets has created the biggest return, even in shaky times. So 25 years since 1931, the market's been down, but 75 years it's been up. And so churches, I could tell you a lot of stories about churches that have grown their resources remarkably because they had the foresight to do this. There's another slide. If you get scared, we've got some great slides here. I added them. I sort of borrowed them from Andy. Andy's the real expert in this area. But reminding us that if you pull out of the market out of fear, your returns go down drastically, just by missing 1 or 2 good days in the market. So, um, just a reminder that through tremendous growth, the foundation's been able to send out $100 million in 2021 and also in 2022 to support mission and ministry. This shows you the growth of the permanent endowment funds, which is the reason why a lot of churches want to invest in that pool. If you had invested 40 years ago, $100,000, then it sent out almost $500,000 for mission, and it stands today at $291,000. This is the magic that our ancestors knew about back in 1799, that they wanted to take advantage of for Presbyterian mission. And that's why we exist as the foundation. Did you know we have a Netflix? We've got a Presbyterian financial Netflix. It's called the Church Financial Leadership Academy. If you go to this website and put in the code PCUSA, you can find, and you're thinking to yourself, what the heck was she talking about with that narrative budget? There is a great short video about narrative budgets. There's a great short video about year-round stewardship and generosity teams, and a lot of other topics. So you'll have these slides and you'll be able to find this website, and the initial code is PCUSA. You'll get a great video from one of my colleagues, and there's also this helpful resources. So it'll lead you to other additional resources on any topic. Stewardship Navigator is another amazing tool that has lots of tools for stewardship, and also has a planned giving navigator that helps you to develop your brochure, your web page. It has a tool for the budget, the narrative budget that I've been talking about, and it has lots of samples and resources for any area of stewardship that you could need. So please do go there and sign up if your church is not already signed up. It's a free resource. This is a screenshot of the narrative budget creator. We have an e-giving platform. If you don't, or if you're paying PayPal, the extra 30 cents on top of the administrative fee, please use us. You don't need to be paying that fee. We provide the fee for an e-giving platform that we provide the reports and the tax notes for the people who give, and we make it really easy for you. And we also provide donor advised funds, which is a great tool through the NCTC that we can provide for families. It's like a family foundation starting at $2,500 to begin teaching your children the values that you share as a family and making grants together. Or it can be a great tax benefit as well. So the donor advised fund is a great tool. You can get it in a lot of different places, but you can get it from your church, which is a really cool way to access that resource. Then I have a whole section about the whole mission vision process, which I'm not really going to go into because it just kind of gives you an overview of how we would discuss mission and vision together. Final slide. We've got a great conference, Stewardship Kaleidoscope. If you don't know about Stewardship Kaleidoscope and you want to hang out with people and talk about great stewardship, either in our virtual online version, or you can come be with us in Minneapolis this fall. Go to the Stewardship Kaleidoscope website and come hang out with us. We also have lots of webinars, all the workshops that I can offer. Back to the message, give away your life. You'll find life given back, but not merely given back with bonus and blessing. Giving, not getting is the way. Generosity begets generosity. I am going to stop sharing, and we have a few minutes for me to answer the questions. Let's see what we got.
I only saw one. Let me go and find my chat here. And I saw one come through from Marcia, who had to leave, but I know Marcia. So not only will she be able to get the answer, but I can send it to her. Marcia wrote this: just this week, our congregation has listed our beautiful church for sale and entered a period of discernment about our future. She wants to know how can Presbyterian Foundation walk with us through this process?
Yep. I mean, the classic answer to that is Project Regeneration, which is the program that we do that is a discernment program for churches that are discerning their future. And so I would encourage them to be directly in touch with me, and I can either come visit them in person, or I can do a Zoom with them, and we can talk about Project Regeneration and what pieces of that. Now they've already decided to sell the property, we can do the piece about discerning, well, where do we go next? Sometimes we do the where do we go next, and then a church decides to sell their property, but we can reorganize the material and
Right.
do it in the way that would be most helpful
Right.
to them. So
yeah, that's great. I will let Marcia know that, but also she'll be able to watch the full recording. Do other people have questions? Let me go. There's something. Okay, so from Pastor Anna on the screen, can you assist with finding grants for restoring historic buildings? We have one that's falling apart, but it's in our village's historic district. We use it for Sunday school, but it isn't entirely safe.
yeah, that's an ongoing issue. We don't really make grants, except for small programs that we have gotten from the Lilly Endowment Foundation. But I would love to talk with you. There are groups. I work with churches that have started, have started a relationship with Fund for Sacred Places. It's a question of really looking for what are the resources in your particular part of the world. And again, if nothing else, we can be a really, I think we can be a helpful sounding board and conversation partner. And we may know about a resource that we can direct you towards. In one case, something came out recently through the National Preservation, it was specifically for African American churches. And I made sure that I sent it out to churches and presbyteries that I thought would be able to be to find that useful. So as things come, it's helpful for us to understand your situation so that as things may come across our transom, we know how to redirect them to you. So yeah, let's start a conversation.
I know that I belong to a church once that went through New York State and had their church declared a historical site. It was a lot of work. And I also know that like the church I belong to now has looked into that, but that's a great tool. But they also, New York State will tell you exactly what you can and cannot do to that building. And so sometimes it really gets in the way of modernizing or making your building safer. So yeah.
You said what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So it's these programs can, they can help, but they can also hinder.
Yes. And
so
yeah.
I welcome people who are muted and off video to come back and ask questions verbally.
Yes, I would agree with that. Are you gonna, man, your voice after the end of the day is gonna be like really tired.
2 sessions. That's okay. That's okay. I'm just gonna go be a GG after this.
Yeah. Oh,
we
good.
Have the big birthday party for my grandbaby.
Yeah, really. So I would encourage other people, if they have something they want to share or ask, to unmute themselves and show themselves and ask questions right out loud.
I see Laura. Laura. Hi, Laura.
Yeah. Hi, good to be with you all today.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Great to have you.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
I don't actually have a question, but I would just share our stewardship and finance committees have been doing a joint book study recently of Not Your Parents' Offering Plate, and that's been really, really helpful.
Great. That's good to know. I know one thing I'm going to do once the recordings and also the PowerPoints from all of the workshops we had today are going to go up on the Genesee Valley Presbytery's website. And I am going to make sure that the recording and the PowerPoint of this is shared with my pastor so that he can share it outward with, I'd like to see everybody on our session, the whole finance committee really see this, maybe even more people. I have been on our finance committee before, but it was because I was on our personnel. I was chair of our personnel committee. And so this was, this was really inspiring for me. I really, really have enjoyed this. And am like, excited about so many different things that I heard this morning. So I want to make sure it gets shared.
I did actually think of a question.
Yes.
One of the things that we had this joint book study on Tuesday, and one of the parts of our discussion was that the author recommends, I know we've talked about narrative budgets. The author recommends only presenting a narrative budget to the congregation as a whole and having the session itself be the ones to work with the line item budget, and perhaps making the line item available if people really want to see it. But, that was a very different idea from what our folks have encountered and I have encountered before. Can you comment? I consulted the Book of Order. I saw that was permissible according to the Book of Order, but I would appreciate your perspective on that.
Yeah. Cliff Christopher is really cool. He's great. But we also need to have some common sense about things. As a pastor, I didn't want to start a church fight over small potatoes, so I think ultimately his idea is a great one. Ultimately, if we were less concerned about what was that little book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, right? If we had our congregations more concerned about the big movements outward and engagement and the big ways to live out there a large Christian life that's making impact and being excited about those things, and they trusted that the narrative budget was effectively telling the story of where the money is going, that would be the best of all possible worlds. But how we get there has to involve steps, right? And helping people to understand why the tool of the narrative budget is the best way to think about and communicate and tell the story. You're never going to get rid of your line item budget. So, don't create circles of suspicion by making people think you're hiding it in some way. I mean, and that could be the danger, right? But you want to get people to make that paradigm shift I was talking about earlier and shift their focus. And so shift their energy, shift their imagination, shift their excitement. And that is a step-by-step process. In order to do that, you want to do it in a way that people are comfortable with it. So maybe you come back, if we could bring ourselves back to the future in 10 years, maybe your church would be, oh yeah, that line item budget is over there someplace, and the finance people, God bless their souls, they make sure that everything's right. But what we're involved with is making sure that we're doing more outreach and more celebration and more activities. Hopefully the culture shifts over time. That's what we would hope. But I wouldn't say just do that. And I think that sometimes Cliff Christopher gets a little bit trouble. Now, there may be some brave pastor out there that says, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to cold turkey it. But I myself am a little careful about that. So that's my feedback. That's just Rose. That's not, that's not an official voice of the foundation.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's actually where we landed. Yeah.
That's where you landed?
Good.
I see Mark's hand.
Yes. Mark.
Thank you, Rose. I was wondering, I think I heard you say that the slides for your presentation would be available for us. How do we get them?
They will be eventually on the website for the Presbytery of Genesee Valley. And I think that at some point, everyone who participated today will get the links for that. If you don't, Mark, you can contact me eventually. And my email address is janet282flynn F as in Frank, LYNN @gmail.com. And I will make sure, it's probably going to take a few weeks for that, a week or so for that to happen. But if you don't get something, go ahead and contact me and I will make sure you do.
Could you repeat the email or whatever?
Yes, it's Janet, JANET, Flynn, all Janet Flynn, 282. Wait a minute. Janet 282 Flynn. Messing up my own email address now. Janet 282 Flynn @gmail.com. And once in a while I'll rattle off my work one, and that's not going to help you.
Well, and mine is at the top. Mine is at the top of the chat. And so if you scroll up to the top of the chat, you'll see my information. And by the way, if you just go to the foundation's website, which you don't even have to know just Google us, and it'll take you to the foundation website, and you can find me very easily there, So, find me and you get your own personal version of the slides. I'll send it to you.
Yes, you were very easy to find because I looked you up last night. Mark? Yeah,
yes,
go ahead.
Mark.
You have a question, Mark?
Mark Stevens.
So no, I just wanted to thank you. Really enjoyed it. I mean, some of the key things, the key takeaways one, that it just reinforces that telling the story and the importance of telling our stories. And I think, so I'm a member of the church where Laura is the pastor, and we've talked a lot about this, but I'm a big believer in, we need to be telling our stories. We don't do enough of that, and doing it consistently. I like some of your ideas around, doing it around the offering and telling stories there. I thought it was very good. You're measuring engagement versus not just measuring attendance is a good one. So just really wanted to thank you. I enjoyed the session this morning. And I also say that, because I put in the chat, I don't know if you saw it, your comment about a growing church always has a deficit. I found that I laughed at that one too. I'm going to share that with our finance committee.
Yeah, I laughed at that too. I'm going, I know our finance committee.
Right. We must be growing then.
Yeah, we must be growing.
Let me make a caveat about that statement. The inverse may not be true, right? The inverse may not be true. Every church that has a deficit may not be a growing church.
Yes.
So that's the inverse. And I would hate for you to go out in the world and say, Rose says every church should have a deficit.
Oh, no. No, but I did like your comment about budgeting for something new every year. I think that was that important one as well. So again, thank you.
I take a lot of risk in these presentations because I go off script a lot. I hope they listen to it all the way to that caveat.
Yeah,
but thank
really.
you for that. I'm so glad. I know we've gotten to the end of our time, and everybody needs a break before worship. So I'm just so grateful that Andy joined me. I'm so grateful that you all thought it not robbery, as we say in the Black church community, that you thought it not robbery to come and gather with us this day. And I pray that you go in peace to the rest of your day and continue to grow and learn and have wonderful experiences.
Thank you. And I would remind all of you that the worship, is on YouTube, and then the next session of classes starts at 11:30, and you just go back to that original email and find the link for your second class. And Rose, I will see you again at 11:30.
If you want to hear more, come back for the second time.
Yeah, really. Y'all have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Oh, you're welcome. We'll see you in a bit.
Okay, thank you.